permission to be live streamed here. Don't leave the webinar. Done that before. You only make that mistake once. All right, social networks. Greetings. Привет, Rossiyskaya Siet Robotov. I greet the Russian botnets in their native language, Mark, usually when they join us. So we are streaming. I'm gonna go ahead and hit record, and then we're underway, guys. Ready?
We are ready. And I see that Evan is there as well. So welcome to today's live stream edition of Running Into the Fog, everybody. Derek Johnson here with Aurora WDC. My brother Eric's out there too. We're known as the Joe Bros, and have a lot of fun with this podcast. Derek, welcome.
Hey, Derek. Thanks for starting us off today.
You know, we have a really unique guest today, and I want to take a moment to thank my really dear friends, and I know they're dear friends of our guest also. Ronnie and Evan Weston are in the audience, virtual audience today, and I'm hoping that one or both of them might come on in the second half of the hour and ask you a question directly. But for our audience, just want to introduce our guest, Mr. Mark Lay, coming to us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mark, welcome to Running Into the Fog. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the questions and talking with you.
You know, I have to admit, I don't know a lot about you, Mark, but that isn't unusual with regards to this podcast. And, you know, while we have had some guests like Ronnie, who came onto this podcast several months ago, and her long form pre-recorded episode was released a couple months back, we have changed the nature of this podcast into a live stream format, 30 minutes being talked about as the unthinkable kind of part of it, and then the unspeakable second half of the hours where we get potentially a little bit more colorful with our debate around the topics at hand. And for our audience today, you're in for a treat because you're talking with a professional money manager. Mark Lay, is going to share with us his journey. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I find your background so interesting. I was in that game once upon a time before I joined my brother in this business a little over 19 years ago. And that's how I met Evan in the first place, and Ronnie, in connection with that. But, you've got a story, Mark, of, I'm going to refer to it as a total blend of perseverance, ambition, adversity, humility, and ultimately forgiveness that I think then also embodies what my brother and I like to say is any good business leader's ability to mode switch between being a mercenary and being a missionary. And the opportunity to see those characteristics combine into what you're doing today. And I can't wait for our audience to hear that part of your story as well, because you're doing some really great social good out there that is really, really incredible. I just think it's awesome. So I'm going to just mention to the audience, we're technically recording episode 35 here of Running Into the Fog today on May the 10th of 2022. With Mr. Mark Lay coming to us from Pittsburgh. Mark, why don't you take it away and share kind of how your story got started?
Great. I am originally from a small town right outside of Pittsburgh called Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, small steel town. I grew up with what I thought I had everything. I thought we were wealthy beyond belief. My father worked in the steel mills. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, as well as in another life, she was a LPN. So I had a great childhood, brother, sister, and very, very, in this town that I grew up in, sports was everything. That was the tool that my mom used to keep me in line in terms of my academic prowess, made sure that if I didn't get good grades in school, I couldn't play basketball, I couldn't play football. My town has such names as Tony Dorsett and Mike Dick and Pistol Pete Maravich and Ty Law, Darrell Revis, Sean Gilbert, all as athletes that have come out of Aliquippa and done quite well for themselves. Some of them are Hall of Famers. So it was something that we all spent a lot of time doing, playing sports. But thank God for my mom and keeping me on track academically, because from Aliquippa, I attended a Columbia University in New York. And growing up in Aliquippa, I had no idea what Ivy League was. But, because I was a good basketball player, I took a trip to Columbia. The reality is I thought I was going somewhere in South Carolina, North Carolina. And when I saw the big lights of New York City, it was my first time there. I said, this is where I want to go to school. It did not have anything to do with the academics. It did not have anything really to do with the basketball. It was the fact that I fell in love with New York City. At Columbia, I was a 4-year starter in basketball. I was captain of the basketball team my junior and senior year. Great experience. While there, I got a chance to meet a gentleman by the name of Goodale Horowitz, who worked at Solomon Brothers, who was the most powerful firm on Wall Street. And I got a chance to visit his office, and his office was bigger than the house that I grew up in. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I want to be one day able to make money and have an office like this gentleman, like Mr. Horowitz. And that's how I started my career in money management or on Wall Street. So my background is such that, once again, I come from a small steel town, but I was afforded opportunities because of athletics to attend an Ivy League institution, and was able to work hard and do the things I needed to do, and ended up on Wall Street.
That's a great story. And actually, you were at Columbia during a rather famous American president. He was a couple of years ahead of you, as I understand, but President Obama was there at Columbia during some of your time. He
graduated in '83. I graduated in '85. He always aspired to be a basketball player, but wasn't on the level where he could play with us. So much more creative academically and politically than I'll ever be. But on the basketball court, I think I could still take him.
There you go.
That was cool. Michelle Obama's brother, Craig Robinson, played at Princeton during that time. And he was by far, in my opinion, the best player in the Ivy League. He's a tall guy, 6'8", 6'9", but he was a very dominant player. Arnie Duncan, who was the Secretary of Education under Obama, was at Harvard during that time. He played basketball. So it really is a network of individuals that you meet and play against, that that can help you as you go along in your career. I always think one of the things that I think is most important, obviously aptitude and hard work and all those things are great, but to be able to build a network of individuals who you can call upon is something that that can last a lifetime.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to toss it to my brother here in a minute, but when we were getting kind of this next round of guests coming up, Ronnie and Evan said to me, you got to get Mark Lay on your podcast, because this podcast, for everybody that is tuning in for the first time, is all about confronting both uncertainty and undercertainty in your life, where you may have enough information, but it isn't enough to perhaps sometimes take you out of that position of being paralyzed by, which route do I go? And, you mentioned it really well, Mark, the opportunity for you to be networked with the Solomon Brothers executive to get you into that game, to help you see your potential beyond being a 4-year starter at Columbia. And that Solomon Brothers introduction opened up, I'm assuming, quite the network that allow you to move on from Columbia and get into that part of the business, right?
Absolutely. And just think about it. I'm a kid from Aliquippa. The Ivy League was not my network. My network was blue collar men and women who I was accustomed to. We fought during the day, and we hung out at night. But it was a small steel town, and all the areas around us were just small steel towns. But when I was exposed to Columbia, I was able to meet men and women who were doing things that I thought was unthinkable. Didn't even know. To be honest, growing up, I didn't know what a stock or a bond was until I got to Columbia. I really didn't know I was poor until I got to Columbia. I thought the fact that I was the first kid on my block with a Schwinn bike made me rich, until my first college roommate said, yeah, my dad owns Korean Airlines and I have a Porsche. I'm like, a Porsche? What's a Porsche? He showed me his car. I was like, wow. I didn't have any idea that I was poor until, I was exposed to New York City and Columbia. So to your point, yes. And I just think that's what life is about, taking advantage of opportunities when you're giving them. As we get into my story, I've had some high highs, I've had some low lows in my life, but I still think everything is an opportunity. And it's, up to the individual to try to take advantage of them.
Eric, what do you think?
So cool. Well, Mark, thank you, Derek, for that windup. And Mark, I really want you to tell our audience a little bit about sort of your why. What makes you tick? Derek actually introduced you to me a few weeks ago by saying, I got the guy that's helping Magic Johnson with the food desert problem in LA. And I said, we need to get him on the podcast. That sounds awesome. Now, that's one sort of piece of evidence about your why. But what does that have to do with the rest of the Mark Lay story? And, what is it that drives you, Mark? What gets your feet out, hitting the ground in the morning and gets you up to, a trot every day?
I just believe in the scripture, to whom much is given, much is required. I mean, I've been blessed my whole life. Like I said, I was an athlete as a little kid. People put me on a pedestal and said I was going to be a good basketball player, football player, whatever. Always given, opportunities. And I think when you're in that position in life, you have to give back as well. So I just believe that adage, to whom much is given, much is required. So when I get up every day, although I'm a capitalist and I love making money and I want to make my wife and family proud, I also want to help others. And I think others deserve that opportunity. Once again, once we get a little further into my story, some of the men and women that I've been surrounded by in my life, some of them weren't given opportunities. They made decisions that, they're not proud of. We've all made decisions, I'm sure, that we're not proud of. But that's the beauty of life. We're getting second chances and third chances and fourth chances, whatever the case may be. So I'm one of those guys who just thinks that if given the opportunity, I got to take advantage of it. And giving someone else an opportunity makes me feel good, makes me feel like, I have purpose. And, you got that Mamba mentality in your background. I'm a fighter. I just, that's how I grew up. No is a starting point in my life. No does not mean that's where it stops. That's where it begins. When somebody tells me no, then I figure out, okay, how do I get them to understand they're making the biggest mistake of their life by not hiring me or not letting me do whatever it is I want to do. So I've always had that type of mentality, and that's where I am in life.
Well, and I know that you've worked with a lot of players in the NBA and in other professional sports. Tell us that angle of the story. How'd you get introduced to that crowd? Is it guys you knew in college ball and then they went on to the pros, or what was your entree into that world?
It's really interesting. Playing college ball at Columbia, you would say, okay, you played in the Ivy Leagues, but we still play St. John's and Georgetown and all those teams as well. And during that era, you had the Chris Mullins and Mark Jacksons and Pat Ewings of the world all playing. So we got a chance to compete at a high level from basketball. In the summers, I played with Rod Strickland and all those guys in New York, and we established friendships. When I started my professional career, one of my clients that I managed money for was the NBA. So the NBA Players Pension Fund was one of my clients. So again, we talk about networks, we talk about individuals you come into contact with, and I just think too, one of the things that I really believe in, and I tell people all the time, when I meet someone, I want them to either say, I want to talk to him again ever because he's a total idiot, or I want them to say, he's the brightest guy I've ever met in my life. I really want to do business with him. I really want him in my life. I really want to know him. Those people in the middle, we forget. So whenever I met people, whenever I'm doing something, I really want to leave an impression on them, one way or the other.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, we've talked in the past as a company about how the opposite of empathy is not antipathy. The opposite of empathy is apathy, is that we don't care. We don't have a response. We just sort of, ignore it. And I think what you're talking about, I love that you quoted scripture there, my man. Are you a man of faith? Do you mind me asking?
Oh, not at all. 100%. My life and everything I have accomplished in life is not because of Mark Lay. And I'm proud to say that I know the good Lord above has been the key architect of everything that I've been through in my life. I profess that, and I believe that in my heart. So yes, I am a man of faith. I am definitely a Christian.
Thank you, brother. And, me too. And I will say that I'm very, very grateful that God brought you to us today. And I want to remind our audience about something. We have this second portion called Unspeakable, where we can get a little more real. And part of getting real is letting our audience come on and act as your interlocutors. Hopefully sort of 3 10-minute sessions or so there, thereabouts. And so I want, we've already got one on deck. Mr. Evan Weston has actually volunteered to be our first contributor in the second half, but we've got 2 more slots available to come on and actually talk to Mr. Lay. So I want you all to be thinking about that. If you've got something you'd like to talk to him about, Evan, I can vouch for your ability to talk about anything. We'll get you on here talking with Mark here in the second half. We're going to say goodbye to the social streamers at that point too, by the way. But I want to show you all something here called a POAP. Now, we've done this a couple times in the past. I'm just going to throw this on screen for you, and hopefully you can scan it. Now, I understand iOS can tolerate the graininess, but Google Android doesn't like it. So hopefully you can all scan that and redeem the POAP. And I see Waleed is letting that catch up a little bit as well. So scan that. I'm going to leave it on screen as we bring Mark back on, and Derek as well. And, Derek, why don't you take the next question with Mark here?
I was just gonna add a little levity to the situation. I can't wait until I see my friend Evan claim his first POAP with his first question. It's going to be awesome. Mark, in my intro, really short intro, I talked about the word forgiveness. And, I know just enough about a portion of your story arc to know that you've had to forgive some people along the way in a particular situation involving, when we were leading up to this, you were quite candid with us that you'd come on here and talk about that part of your story too. And that opportunity to be in the White House and then also have some of those lowest of lows take you to literally the big house, or different word for, federal prison. Can you share a little bit about that? And then we'll go deeper in the second half about that, and how you actually, as a man of faith and everything else that you're about, how can you practice forgiveness, and what might our listeners take away from your story to help them do the same?
Yeah. Well, once I graduated from Columbia, I began a career on Wall Street. And because of discipline and working really hard, I was able to initially work on Wall Street, foreign exchange trader, do really, really well. Then I started my own firm. Started with zero and grew the firm to over $4 billion that I managed money for institutions all over the country and all over the world. As I said, accounts like the NBA and Boeing, Sprint, Raytheon, Shell, major states, Illinois, New York, Florida, major cities, you name a city, New York, Chicago, anything. I managed money for some of the who's who in the country. During that period, I was making a ton of money. And you use words like humility or on the other side of the equation, sometimes we get so full of ourselves and we think, man, I'm smart. I did this or I did that. So the reality is I spent a lot of time on shows like CNBC and CNN and Fox talking about financial markets and, based on current policy, what was going to happen and things of that nature. And I always gave them my true, earnest, honest opinion of what I thought. Maybe sometimes people liked it. I would get a call from the governor of a state to say, look, Mark, you need to be a little bit more biased. You sound like a Democrat, or you sound like a Republican, whatever the case may be, instead of, no, that's your opinion. But the reality is I was able to, do really, really well in the money management industry, make a lot of money. But back in the early 2000s, one of my clients was the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio had a event called CoinGate, in which someone did something supposedly illegal, and they went to jail for 10 years. Well, during that whole period, the state of Ohio became a hotbed for potential fraudulent activity. And that was during the 2004 presidential election, when Senator Kerry and George Bush Jr. were running for president. And then it was really believed that the state of Ohio was going to determine the next president of the United States. But all these scandals were starting to break out. And in the midst of all those scandals, a scandal broke out with Mark Lay. There's a cover up with Mark Lay, one of the state of Ohio's money managers. He lost $200 million and they're covering it up. But the reality was and is, I actually made money. The overlay strategy unequivocally, absolutely lost $200 million, but the underlying portfolio made money. So when I was presented with the opportunity to take a plea and just do a small amount of time for something that I know I didn't do, I refused and I went to trial. But when I went to trial, the judge said, when the trial was over, he said, guilty, sentenced to 144 months. Now me, being the genius that I am, I looked at my attorney and said, there's no way I could do a year. 14 months, I mean, 14 months, 4 days, that's absurd. I've never been in a courtroom, let alone am I going to do time. And he looked at me and said, Mark, he said, 144 months. 144 divided by 12, that's 12 years. I can't do 12 years.
Right.
On 12 years with good behavior, you do 10 and a half years. And that's what I did in federal prison, 10 and a half years. And although I will tell you, it's not, anything glamorous about it at all, but it's nothing like TV as well. The reality is it's a dark place, but it's a place where you can still do good. And I met a ton of men. And I always use my own personal percentages. I say 75% of the men who were in there should not have been in there. 25% are straight crash dummies and should be incarcerated. But 75% of them, in my opinion, were men who were victims of their circumstances, whether it was lack of education, whether it was trying to provide for their families, or whatever the case may be. They were not selling drugs or doing whatever they were convicted of doing just for the sake of doing it. And it taught me a lot about humility, because you're talking about a man who was making, 7 digits, and thought that anyone incarcerated deserves bread and water. Yet and still, I'm living in that world and was going to be there for quite some time. And it taught me a sense of humility. It taught me a sense of purpose. And it was an experience, as I look back on, has contributed to my positive outlook on life. When you use words like forgiven, people always say, do you hate the feds or for putting you in jail for something that you didn't do? And most people who looked at my case and understood my case said there was forensic audits done, no trades were done wrong. You didn't personally gain in any way, shape, or form from any of the transactions or anything from it, but you still did all that time. Are you bitter? And it's a cliche and it's really corny to say, but the reality is inside people say you have 2 choices. You can be bitter or better. And I was able to make myself better. And part of being better was giving back. Part of being better was being able to forgive. We use Jesus as an example. That was a person who died for something he didn't do. Whatever faith you believe in, maybe you believe that or not. But the reality is, I believe that. And so it's just not in me to carry grudges. I'm very blessed to have a wife and family and friends who just love and support me in every way. There's absolutely no way I receive on a daily basis. And that's how I live my life.
Wow, what a testimony. So number one, I hear a whole lot of lessons for the world in that testimony, by the way, Mark. And, obviously, submission to God's will. I mean, God put you in a place you didn't necessarily want to be, but you're going to make the most of it. And you're going to approach it with a set of eyes that say, why? Why am I here? Who am I about to be introduced to that has been put in my path and me in theirs? And man, this is going to be no fun being away from my family for 10 and a half years if I'm lucky. But there's nothing I can do about it. I got it. You can be bitter, you can be better, right?
Yeah,
Derek?
absolutely. And also for me too, it was just important now at this phase of my life. Once again, I came home and, CEOs and people of just great influence embraced me and said, Mark, what can we do to help, on the rest of your path, the rest of your journey? And it made me realize though, those men that I was with. And I just said, listen, I have to create opportunities. So this whole concept of workforce development It was I said, this is going to be my way of giving back, creating opportunities for other men and women who weren't given these opportunities that I were given to make a difference in their lives. So that path has been one that, once again, it's been very encouraging. It's been very rewarding. And it's something that I really relish and cherish.
Let's go a little bit deeper before we lose those just on the social side who haven't registered for the second half of our hour, Mark. What cities are you most active in? Are there any people in this new kind of, I talked about being a mercenary and a missionary. I heard you talk about how you'd fight in Aliquippa, and you probably saw plenty of that while you were doing your time in the big house, and you have had exposure to that side. But now you're serving as a incredible missionary in some of these pursuits, and you're living your life to be better rather than bitter, and kind of going on. Just for a few minutes, would you expand on that? Kind of what cities are you most active? Where are you placing your time and your emphasis right now?
Okay. No, to be honest too, I have to say, I can't crack an egg in a food fight. So I wasn't a big fighter. I tried to defend myself on the streets of Aliquippa, but I was better on the basketball court than I was in the ring. And while I was incarcerated, I'm telling you, that's once again how you know the power of God in one's life. Never once was I ever threatened or felt like I needed help because I was going to get in a fight. And I'm one who always voices his opinion. And while I was in there, I would teach classes, and I would tell guys a lot bigger, stronger, tougher than me. Listen, my class started at 12 o'clock. You get there at 12:05, you're getting kicked out. 11:45 was on time for a 12 o'clock class, as far as I'm concerned. And they all fell in line, and the guys were they embraced me. And it was from that perspective, I really understand that when you say hedge of protection and all those types of things, because I really wasn't in there fighting or had to fight. If someone looked at me wrong, there was probably someone who would say, "Why are you looking at him like that?" You know what I mean? So I'm very fortunate in that regard. Most of my efforts now are concentrated, from here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, where I call home. That's where we initially launched the projects that I'm working on. We are scaling, they're very scalable. So we will be in cities like Philadelphia and New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. The concepts of workforce development, the concepts of food deserts, all the social determinants of health are countrywide. And that's the mission that I'm on, to really be able to make a difference across the country in the lives of men and women in these distressed communities, and let them know that there is hope. There is hope. If I could do it from my background, from the things that I've experienced, absolutely they can do it. They can, and they will. Once again, I've grown and learned that, can't say the world, but there are a number of people that can be saved and be helped. And those individuals are the ones I want to help. So initially, the platform is in Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania, but we are quickly expanding it across the state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, and then we'll be in the Midwest and out West very shortly.
Wow. So that is clearly your new calling, Mark. And you let the Joe Bros know how we can help in any way possible. That just sounds super exciting and overlaps with a lot of our missions that, the good Lord's revealed to us here over the last few years during the pandemic. So I'm super excited to talk about that. We have 1 minute left, and Derek, you're going to get the final, stand here to take us into Unspeakable. Unthinkable is about to come to an end. And for those of you who have not yet scanned the QR code, here it is. You got 1 minute to scan it and redeem your POAP if you want it. We're going to be using this over the summer for some kind of cool stuff. You're going to see these applications start to emerge probably in June. So as we start to bring this out, just scan it, redeem it, and claim it, and keep it in your wallet. We're going to say goodbye to the social anonymous streamers here in a little bit, or das vidanya, as they say in Russia. And when we say goodbye to the social streamers, come on over to openrecon.com. You'll find a link over there to register and join the private Zoom bridge here in the second half for Unspeakable. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and cut that social stream. Derek, take us into Unspeakable. Let's talk more about that mission that you just talked about, Mark. You touched on it. I want to hear all the details. And we're going to let Evan come on here in about 60 seconds. I'm going to be upgrading the Ronnie Weston identity from the audience. You are being promoted to panelist now, Evan, and we'll bring you on screen here in just a second. Derek, take us into Unspeakable.
You know, I would be remiss if I didn't spend a minute talking about networking. You know, Mark, you started out your story